you ever feel like your life is Groundhog Day? The same thing every day. Same thing every day. Do you wonder if it's possible to get excited about life again? Welcome to GoalPost. The path to the end zone is all in your head. Dynamic conversations covering topics about mindsets that high-performing people use to get exactly what they want out of life. Be prepared to be challenged, but be prepared to receive the tools to help you reach your goals and beyond. Unconventional, but effective. Heard on allrealradio.com. Welcome to GoalPost. Now your host, Janelle Sam.
It's not every day that you run into or you meet someone who has such an extraordinary life journey that on the surface, if you haven't heard what that story was, it seems as though they're just living in the lap of luxury. If you're listening to the show tonight, how would you feel? What do you think you would be able to do if you learn what it takes to grow a company from zero to having an effective over $6 billion? What would you do if you were given that one piece of advice that is crucial for you to be able to move the lever in your own life pursuit? My name is Janelle Sam. I am the host of GoalPost, and welcome. Thank you for joining me tonight. In the show, I will be speaking with Damon Williams. And you're going to hear his story, and you're going to learn what life was like for him growing up in Houston, in the hood, in a family that did very well financially, but that it took him a while to understand what his normal was not normal, but more importantly, he had to learn for himself that he had to do the work himself. He couldn't just ride on the coattails of his family in order to achieve a meaningful life as he has today. You will hear about his failures, his pain, and how he did the work to find and embrace his authentic self, to be the man that he is today. If this is something that you will find value in, I encourage you, I welcome you to stay and hear his story. Today, I am joined by Damon Williams. Damon and I met in the ecosystem here in Houston, and we just hit it off immediately. And the first time we met, engaged in a conversation that went, I don't know, 3 hours, like
quite a while.
we were talking for quite a while. And, I just want to introduce who he is and who you're going to be listening to today. Damon is well known right here in the Texas region for his decades of professional experience in a myriad of industries, with a specialization in communications, public and private partnerships, and business process outsourcing consulting. He is the current president and founder of Touchpoint Strategies, and he has led his firm to create over $400 million in successful public-private partnerships, resulting in over $6 billion in new real estate development. Touchpoint Strategies is a service-disabled, veteran-owned small business that leverages a unique perspective built from a deep expertise and longstanding relationships in industry, local, national government, and politics to engineer plans and processes to facilitate client needs and allow them to achieve optimal returns on investment. But Damon wasn't always at Touchpoint. And so prior to founding that company, he developed a 39-unit gated garden home community adjacent to the University of Houston main campus. And he served as the Director of Economic Development and Public Engagement for an urban planning firm. And he was also the Chief of Staff for an at-large Houston City Council member, served as a district director for a Texas state representative, and was a recipient of the Navy Achievement Medal, awarded for logistical and engagement excellence in humanitarian outreach. Damon has also founded and continues to manage Assembler. Did I see that correct? Did I get that right? It's a software system, Assembler. It's a software system that is an innovative solution for growing and managing supplier diversity and provides a one-stop solution to identifying and purchasing products and services from diverse suppliers. And Damon went to the Jesse H. Jones School of Business right here in Texas at Southern University in Houston, where he majored in finance. Damon, welcome.
Thank you. Thank you. It reminds me how old I am to hear all those things.
Isn't that something, right? When you don't really, you're just going about life and you're not like stopping to kind of look back, right?
No.
And then you hear somebody's actually reading about or seeing like what you've accomplished, and they're like, man.
I actually forget it. Yeah, I forget about it a lot. My staff jokes about that all the time. They're like, when something will come up, I'll say, did I tell you about the time when I did, this or that? And they're like, no, but, but go ahead. I'm like, oh yeah, by the way, for a couple of years, I was, I did this or that, so.
And then you look back and it really is kind of amazing what you've been able to do and accomplish. So just tell me something, Damon. You're born and raised here in Houston? You're a Houstonian, as they like to call it?
I'm a fourth generation Houstonian. Yeah, not very many of us.
Okay, because I'm a transplant, like fresh, still green behind the ears, having moved from New Jersey to Houston. So I'm still kind of getting the ropes of the city.
Yeah, my family still has property that my great grandmother purchased as soon as Black people were allowed to purchase property. Wow. It stopped being property and we're allowed to purchase it. She moved from 4th Ward, Freedmanstown, to 3rd Ward, and bought a piece of land that is still in my family. It has a small multifamily development on it that's been there forever. Yeah.
Wow. Okay. So there's roots, and then there's roots. Right. And so your family has been here from since, I guess,
from slavery.
Slavery, and haven't left the region, and you've been able to really grow beyond that. And actually, let's take it back a notch before we talk about where you are today. What was life like for you growing up? I mean, your grandmother owned this property, which put you at an advantage in terms of having some sort of wealth. And I say that very liberally, right? Because to own it is one thing, but that doesn't necessarily mean that, money was falling from the trees. So what was life
Absolutely
like?
Not. So great question. So my family, as I said, this was property my great grandmother purchased. And so it had been passed down. By the time I came along, my father and his siblings and all his first cousins were heirs to the property. And be clear, I'm not talking, 1,000 acres. It's about a 10,000 square foot, maybe 12,000 square foot lot.
But still, it's property, right?
It is property, but and it was occupied. So over time, over the, generations, heirship property, as it's called, property passed from generation to generation, the ownership gets diluted, and so does any revenue from it. So from that perspective, this was my father's side of the family. From that perspective, there wasn't a lot of wealth generated from that property, although now it's pretty valuable. On my mother's side of the family, my mother's father was a businessman, a educator, a minister. And so it was that side of the family that I really spent more time growing up with. And he bought to this day, I still don't understand how my grandfather did all the things that he did. Like I've tried to do the math for 20 years and I can't figure it out. He had 5 children. He gave each of his children a house. He gave each of his children at least one, some of them multiple cars over time.
Mm-hmm.
Built a thriving daycare center business. And when my grandmother got tired of running a daycare, he by hand changed the building over, converted it into a shoe store. And so
wow.
my first job was actually working in a ladies' shoe store that was owned by my family. So you talk about being so we were we were in the hood,
mm-hmm.
but I was
at the top of the chain in the hood.
I was basically grown before I really figured out that we weren't middle class, like America middle class. We were Black middle class.
Right.
So yeah.
Okay.
Yeah. It was a very interesting upbringing.
That is fascinating. Is your grandfather still alive today?
No, he passed away around 1990 or 91. I don't remember which exactly.
But what an amazing legacy to have passed on, because one of the questions that I was going to ask you tonight was, well, how did you know that you wanted to get in a business or in the world of business? But it seems as though you didn't know any different. Like you were born into a family where that mindset was there. So literally from at the boob, you grew up where you were surrounded by business minded.
We always saw it. It's again things you don't know that you're ingesting, right? So my grandmother always had a business going on. My grandfather was a school teacher, a high school teacher, and our pastor. And he started out originally. He had something that no longer exists now. They called them fix-it shops.
A fix-it shop, okay.
So fix-it shop was a handyman shop, but he would fix TVs and radios or toasters and whatever people had in their homes that would break. They'd bring it to my grandfather. He'd figure out how to fix it and fix it.
Right.
Right. And so from that, he bought this fairly large piece of land and built by hand. He had an electrician come in and do the electrical work, but other than that, he built by hand a building and a business that's still there. My grandmother sold it off shortly before she passed. But yeah, so growing up, my grandparents, my great aunt was a caterer. And so when we were kids, she would make us cater waiters.
Right.
At all these,
so you
parties,
were working and right.
Yeah, parties in River Oaks. And so it was just kind of a known thing that you could just do your own, you could have your own business.
Now, see, it's easy for you to say that. And if anyone's listening to this, right, this is what I find fascinating. And this is, if I could impart it to anyone listening, the language, and when I say language, I am not referring to English. The language that was spoken in your family when it came to creating was so natural for you. It's a first language for you. Create. You see an opportunity, create. And so the way you look at problems or challenges is very, very unique, because you've grown up surrounded by individuals who, when you're talking about challenges and problems, they're also probably in the same breath talking about the opportunity.
Yeah, so interesting. But so with my great aunt in particular, you have to think about the time we're talking about. This is the 40s, the 50s, the 60s. I came along 1970, and she had been in business for herself for some time by the time I came along. But it was really for a simple reason. Black women, especially of that era, who were not, highly educated enough to be school teachers. Right. A large part of that workforce were domestics. And my great aunt was not built for that.
Okay.
So she figured out early on she couldn't be a maid. She just wasn't her temperament and her her personality just wouldn't fit, right? So she took what was an opportunity, which was these people with wealth expect that their food and their events will be handled by Black people. They just generally thought of that as their servants.
Right.
She figured out, no, I can run, this can be my business and you can be my client.
Right.
But that's the extent of that. So she did catering and flowers and all those things for, probably 30 or more years.
Did she, growing up as a boy and growing up around her and growing up around your grandfather, and even your father, with everyone who had some sort of entrepreneurial endeavor, is there anything that kind of stands out now today that you realize was not common for many other households, or what you were learning as a boy? And I say today because when you're growing up in it, it's your norm. What do you mean? You mean you don't do that? You wouldn't realize that until you're kind of grown and then realize what that opportunity was for you.
Yeah, it was very interesting growing up. So my father was a hustler. And I mean that in the literal sense of the word. He almost always had a job, meaning he worked at the airport. He was a sky cap.
Okay.
And then later he worked at the ramp as a crew chief for baggage claim. But that was like his job.
Right.
How we lived, how we did everything was my father hustled, from card games to he was in the nightclub business to, so we were very much plugged into this other world, this other economy, but it didn't live in our house. If I can explain it that way, I didn't know until I was in my teens, my mid-teens, that what all these people did wasn't normal for other people. So just a quick example, when we were, school clothes, right?
Right.
Everybody gets ready, they go to, wherever, and they get their school clothes, or if you didn't have a whole lot of money, you go and put them on layaway, right? And pay a little bit. We shopped at home.
Right.
For school clothes.
What do you mean shopped at home? What do you mean? You had a store in the house? What do you mean shopped at home?
So boosters, thieves who stole high-end clothes would come to our house.
What?
With clothes. They would go get clothes in our size. So they would go and procure our school clothes. So my sister, my baby.
Personal shopping. So this is back in the day. It's like having a personal stylist / shopper who's creating your outfits.
Who gave you a deep discount, right? It's a personal shopper with a deep discount.
Right.
Right. But so my sister, when she started first grade, I remember she had 5 fur coats.
Okay.
Yeah, we lived in Cashmere Gardens, which I don't know if it's literally a street over from 5th Ward.
Okay.
So we lived in the hood. And I had the finest of clothes all the time. My sister always did. My dad, drove a Mercedes, and, and so I just thought that was how people lived, and
that was your normal.
Yeah, steaks, food, the food we would eat, cases of steaks would show up at our house, and just I thought it was normal. We were always around hustlers, right? And it was the 2 things I learned as I got older. One was that it wasn't normal for everybody, and then 2, I learned what a lesson about people and what made you honorable, right? What you did wasn't what made you honorable or not. So my dad was in the club business. And so there would be lawyers and doctors and hustlers and pimps and everybody in the club, right? And nobody got treated different because of what they did. It was who you were. And so guys would come in and they'd have a lot of money and nobody respected them. And guys would come in and they didn't have very much money. And everybody would fall over backwards, you know, praising them or help, let me buy you a drink. Hey, no, you can't spend money here, you know. And so I started to figure out it was less about your circumstance and all about what you made of it as you became a person, right?
Oh my gosh. This is going to take us, we're going to probably spend the next hour talking just about this and the importance of what you're saying. And it is a concept that I think when you grasp it at the basic level, you understand that when you're authentic to who you are with everyone in every circumstance, even if your circumstances around you change, you're consistent. That's your character. That is your purpose. That is what is unchanging. And that is the truth of who you are. And that is what I believe, strongly believe, keeps you going towards where you're trying to reach. I mean, there's so much to discuss on this. Here's what we're going to do. We're going to take a little break. We'll take a little bit break. And right when we come back, we're going to just start right off on this very topic and what you just said. I'm Janelle Sam. Join me on GoalPost as we hear from Anna Gonzalez, Senior Program Manager of Content Strategy at Google. Anna talks about navigating the corporate ladder, even though she was treated like an other.
For a little while, it was, worried about, oh, am I not Mexican enough for people? Like they see me and they're like you said, who does that girl think she is? Like, that's not how traditionally I've seen people who are Mexican respond, I don't think, and act. You know what I mean? So it's like, depending on if you're outside the group or inside the group.
And what you learned about not giving up.
I try and remain on the Care Bear side. I try and remain, rainbows, bubbles, unicorns, all pink, all good, all love as much as possible because, I step one foot out of line and people are like, no.
Well, let's talk about that. What advice does Anna have for us?
The one lesson I have learned is don't take it personally. Don't internalize it. Don't think that you do need to change because this person feels terrible around you, which is, it was hard, but just get yourself friends who can hang.
Join me on GoalPost every Sunday evening on allrealradio.com. If you're now joining us, welcome to GoalPost. And I am speaking with Damon Williams, who is the president of Touchpoint Strategies right here in Houston, Texas. And just before we went on the break, Damon was, talking about his childhood, talking about what he grew up with, what surrounded and was the main influence for him in his formative years. And just before we went on the break, the last thing that he said that I just think is a very important topic, a very important concept that as a listener, if you're hearing this, to really understand what that means and the implication, where he's saying that he grew up with a certain level of wealth and respect, even though it was in the hood here in Houston, right? Always having, not really ever wanting with a family of entrepreneurs, but that what was important that he learned really early on, it wasn't how much money you had, but it was who you were. It was that character. Let's talk about that. Like, at what point, when did you grasp that concept? Like, was there something that happened, or was it just an aha moment that made you?
There's a lot of things over time. Like, I remember being a boy. My grandfather, my mother's father, as I said, was a pastor and a businessman. He was a man of few words outside of the pulpit, because in the pulpit he could go, right? Right. He would go, like,
right.
But So as a child, the thing I probably loved the most about my time with him was he would just call. And by this time we lived next door to them. Okay. And he would call over, and I get on the phone, and he'd say, "Hey boy, you want to ride with me?" And I'm like, "Yeah." He would never say where we were going. He would never say what we were going to do, but I would just run and get dressed and go with my grandfather. And so he would take me with him. Mm-hmm. He owned properties all over the north side, like rental houses and mm-hmm. Just lots, and he would take me around and sort of show me everything. And this one particular day, there used to be a bank here called Port City. Okay. It's now Chase Bank. Now okay. They've been bought, a few times. Bought by, yeah. Mm-hmm. But the bank was in a Black neighborhood, but of course, all the execs in the bank were white. Right. And I remember walking into the bank with my grandfather, mm-hmm. and the lady at the desk, saying, "Oh, Mr. Alexander, so great to see you. Let me go tell," I don't even remember the bank president's name, "Let me go tell him you're here." And she goes to the back, and the bank president comes out and, shakes my grandfather's hand, and he sits down and says again, "What can we do for you today, Mr. Alexander?" Blah, blah, blah.
So let me put this in perspective. This is right here in Texas. All right, we're down here all down in the South.
And this early 70s.
Early 70s, a Black man 76. Going into a bank. Okay. All right. Just want to make sure. Yes.
Yeah. Yeah. So, and he had business loans. He had, I remember that it made an impact, on me, because I had never really thought of it that way. So yeah, it wasn't one particular thing that sort of crystallized things, but it was just sort of the amalgamation of things. And on the flip side, on my father's side, with my father in particular, I couldn't go any place and I looked just like my dad.
Okay.
So, I'd be wherever, and sometimes doing things I wasn't supposed to be doing. And invariably somebody would be like, "Hey, aren't you Skip? Aren't you Skip, son?" Like, yeah.
You lived in that village, right? So they all knew.
Right. Your dad is not gonna go for this. So you need to go do, you need to do better, go do what you're supposed to be doing. And so it was just, I didn't have a real grasp of what anonymity was like.
Right.
Because my neighborhood was greatly my family for several blocks, mm-hmm. Or at least I had family on each of the blocks. And then when I would go other places, my dad's name carried.
And that character was important, right? Because it carried a lot of weight with it, who you are. When you say you're going to do something, doing it, or whether someone's looking or not, mm-hmm. right? Because of what it meant, right? And that it sounds as though, and you can tell me, growing up in the era that you grew up, in the way that you grew up in that era, as a Black family that was doing financially well, probably better than some of the other counterparts from other races, whether it be white or whatever, which was not, common. Like, did that put a lot of pressure on you?
Yes and no. I'll say it created more awkward situations, I would say, than it put pressure on me. Because like I said, I honestly didn't understand that it wasn't common, or I didn't think it was special.
Right.
So it's just how you live, right? And it wasn't always great or anything, there were definitely struggles and bad parts of like anybody else's, upbringing. But I was in my 20s really before I started to really put together that the the totality of all that had created us in a very different space, had created me in a very different space. You know, I didn't, my mother's youngest sister was in college when I was in elementary school. And so she would take me to the University of Houston to classes with her. So I was 8 or 9 years old in the biology lab of University of Houston doing dissections because I had an aptitude for science. So because I had a kid's aptitude and I was showing some promise in that area, I got taken to college with her. It wasn't like I was enrolled, but you know what I mean? Like other people
but you got that exposure. But other people I grew up
with didn't even have people in their family who had gone to college.
I was just going to say that, right? So, you know, let's look at the picture that's being painted here, which is because your family had a certain level of wealth, it provided certain opportunities, which as a child, you didn't know any better. It was just, that's just his life, right?
Right.
But to have an older family who is one in college to take you with her so you could be exposed to that at that, you know, the higher level. So for you, going to college probably wasn't even a thought or a question. You were just like, you do it because that's what you do, because that's normal. I'm assuming. I could be wrong.
It wasn't
not necessarily forced, but not like it wasn't a far out thing. Right.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
Which back then, you know, for many people still, right. It's kind of like, I mean, I think the discussion today is a little different because of how expensive it's gotten. But having access to that kind of opportunity, the conversations about schooling was different. The conversations about how you lived was different. When you're having conversations with your grandfather, not saying he's having complicated business discussions with you, but you grew up in this ecosystem, which is reflected in the way you're living today. Because let's fast forward. Let's fast forward today where you are running this, you know, amazing company and you have kids, right?
5.
And so your kids are growing up where their normal is not necessarily the normal for many people.
Yeah. 2 of my children are very entrepreneurial.
Any surprise there?
No. It was literally, my wife and I were joking about this earlier today. My youngest son, like, it was undeniable from birth. Like he was always going to be his own person. Like right. He's like like I said, my great aunt. He's not built to work for other people.
Right.
It's just not.
Which means I could kind of tell the kind of son he's been, which is like, no, you know what? Challenging, but
his
see
discipline,
the leadership. Right.
His discipline is outrageous. Like, you know, he's still a kid. He'll be 20 this year. He's still young. He's still, you know, does the things that young people do, and you know, but his determination and his faith in himself is just off the charts. And so he manifests and materializes these things that are amazing under any circumstance. And I don't say that because he's my son. It's objectively true. And my daughter is exactly the same way in her field. Like, she is killing it.
I like to have the conversation about the thought processes that many people hold on to that they don't realize is holding them back or preventing them from being able to provide opportunities in a way where they're thinking in the world of in that we're living in a world of abundance. And I had mentioned in the first show for GoalPost, you know, I kind of went into that where we think in this space of let's talk about money only in the giving of it, not in the receiving of it.
Right.
Because if you're talking about the receiving of it, oh my love, the love of money, we bring up all sorts of religious scripture. We don't think of, if you're receiving it, what you're able to do with it.
Right.
in terms of abundance, in terms of if you're a parent, what you're able to provide, the opportunities you're able to provide for your kids, or if you're spending it, the jobs you're providing, because whether you hire household help, you buy a big house, that house has to be built by somebody, that in the receiving, there's abundance in what you're actually giving through the use of it. And so the mindset, the thought of a child who's growing up in a household where there is abundance and the parents live in a world of abundance in terms of, if I need to do this, well, guess what? I could go out there and figure out a way to make it happen. And it's not like you sit there and sit the child down and say, like, this is how you have to make it happen. It's kind of like, you know, kids learn how to walk because they watch you walk. Like they learn how to speak first words and then the sentences, because they're just absorbing like sponges. You don't teach them every single word they learn how to speak. They're able to learn and pick it up. And I really believe in the case of you, that's what happened. And you partnered up, your wife has to have a similar kind of mindset and thought patterns, because you wouldn't have been a good pairing without that. And then your kids grew up in this. Your kids grew up in this.
It's an interesting, so the mindset part is something that wasn't always, although I was always exposed to, you know, entrepreneurship, there was a long time when I didn't consciously believe that I could do it. The crazy part was every time I didn't think about it, things would happen.
Okay.
So as soon as I stopped, you know, self-sabotaging, things would just, you know, happen.
You got out of your own way?
Yeah. People would, I was really, really good at doing things in manifesting other people's visions. I remember, like,
I need you to say that again. Like, I need you to say that.
Yeah.
The back of the bus.
I was really good at manifesting other people's vision. I could see the path forward. I could conjure the resources. I could marshal the forces, all of that, as long as I was tucked behind it being someone else's vision. I used to say to my old mentor before he passed, used to get on me about that all the time. I would tell him, I'm a great number two. I don't need to be number one. Like, I don't need my name on the door. I don't need, you know, I'm a great number two. Let me do what I do. And he would push me, and we would end up in these, you know, arguments and all this stuff. And because he could see it very clearly and I refused to. So it was years later when it finally sunk into me, years later, and not that many years ago, when it finally sunk into me that two things. One, I could do for me what I had done for others. And two, the reason I hadn't been as successful at doing what I was doing was because those were talents and traits that God gave me for my vision.
Not for somebody else's vision, for yours.
I was right, putting it in the wrong place. And so putting the seeds in the wrong place so they wouldn't grow right.
That's powerful.
And painful to learn. Powerful to, you know, to be able to say now, but it was a painful set of lessons to get to there.
Are you willing to talk about that?
Sure. Yeah. I'll just say, so the recurrent theme for 20 years of my life was like, God's amazing, right? So God would always drop me into these situations where I was working with the best at what they did. And I don't mean like the best I'd ever met. I mean, objectively, people who were considered the best at what they did. And so I would learn. I'm blessed to be able to learn really quickly, right? And so I would learn, and I would sort of start trying to make myself in that image
of the person you were learning from,
of the best.
Okay.
Yeah.
Right.
And thinking, I finally found my thing.
Right.
And I say this, and people who experience it will understand this with no degree of bragging that I say this. The biggest problem that I had was I was really good at a lot of things.
That is a problem.
It was a horrendous
were you great
problem.
at any one thing?
I was very, very good at a bunch of them, right? And so I was good enough at it that objectively I could have gotten great.
Okay.
But that wasn't the exercise, right? I thought because I was good at it that's what I was meant to do. Okay. Never considering that all these things were pieces, were tools that had to be in place for what I would do later.
Wow.
It never occurred to me that that having a great hammer doesn't mean you're supposed to be a carpenter your whole life.
Oh my God. Yes.
Having a great knife doesn't mean you're supposed to be a chef or a butcher.
Right.
Right. Where I got the tools, how the tools were used, where I got them seemed to be the way. So it was many years later, after lots of frustration and like literal tears, trying to figure out, ask God, like, what's going on, man? Like, what are you doing? Like, why doesn't any of this stick? Guys who are worse at these things than me, guys who I'm clearly better at than this, are doing better.
Right.
Because every time I get to a certain point where I'm about to, go to the next level,
something
the whole
would
thing
happen.
it collapsed.
Right.
So I started jokingly saying, and it became a truth that I live by. The story of Jonah and the whale, Jonah and the fish, as it's called. About.
Yes.
Okay. So Jonah's supposed to be going to Nineveh, and he jumps on this ship going someplace else. And essentially, basically, God sinks the ship, right?
Mm-hmm. And he got swallowed up by a whale.
Right, got swallowed up by it. So to be taken back to where he was supposed to be. I've seen God sink ships to get me off of them. When I'm on this, I got it. I know what I'm supposed to be doing. This ain't the whole ship to get me off of it, to get me back on track to where I'm supposed to be.
Because we're too hard-headed.
Yep. When I learned to stop fighting it.
Too stubborn to listen to the whispers. Because it starts off as a whisper, and we know it, but we don't really pay attention to it because I think we're too busy paying attention to what we think everybody else thinks we should be doing.
Right. And sometimes for ego reasons, sometimes it's misguided faith. I believe if you've put me here, then this is where I'm supposed to be. And it's literally like saying, God, you let me make it to high school. I'm gonna be in high school forever.
Right. And that's exactly right.
That's not a thing.
Right.
Right. Literally not a thing. Even to teach there, you have to go to school and come back.
Right.
Right. So that was a recurrent lesson that kept coming back until I finally learned it.
I love that analogy. And, that really touches on a few things, right? You're not going to move forward until you've mastered the level you're at.
Right.
You'll just be stuck. You'll be stuck where you are until you don't. Right. Mm-hmm. And until you've mastered, then you can level up. But I really agree with that whole analogy of where in life, when everything is going wrong, it just might be what's needed to make things right.
Right.
And for me, that was also my defining moment. It took me going through a divorce because I was like, I did everything right. What do you mean? I was a good wife. I was a good mother. I went to school. I had a good job. Like, I volunteered in the community. What do you mean? Like, and this destructive energy that happened, and I'm like, my kids and everything, and I had to lose myself and lose that identity in a very painful way, only to realize that there was something better that was waiting on the other side.
Oh, 100%. Like that's literally how Touchpoint got to be what it is I worked for a consulting firm for a few years, and the economic downturn, the crash,
Which one, 2008 or
2008? Yeah, right. We've had two since then.
I know.
But
I think we're old enough. I'm like, all right, which one are we talking
first
about?
one of-
Because
the
now
first
we've
big
lived
one
through,
of our time, right? Yeah, the first big one of our time.
Oh my Lord. I think our generation has lived through a lot of like world events. Like, I think that's enough. That's enough of the history books.
We've hit reset a bunch of times, right?
We did.
The .com bubble and
my God.
so yeah,
Y2K.
so yeah. So I guess 2008 wasn't the first, but it was the first real estate one.
The real estate one, yes.
But when that happened, all most of the deals that I was working on for the firm shut down.
Oh wow.
And so I got laid off.
Mm-hmm.
And so the only thing worse than no faith is half faith. Right? So I got laid off on a Monday. Wednesday, I had gone out and got my DBA for Damon Williams Consulting. I had written a press release. I had gotten it on the news, like it was a thing. And so I launched this iteration of myself as an independent consultant, and promptly went right back to the same firm and worked as a subcontractor.
Wow. Mm-hmm.
Right? For
as a 1099,
I just tucked myself in there for years.
Mm-hmm.
Right? Because I was internal, I couldn't charge what I would charge if I was actually independent.
Right.
Right.
So you were cutting yourself short, selling yourself short.
Yeah, I did. I literally sold myself short for a great number of years. And how that all ended was a deal was brought in through some people I knew, and the deal ended up going. The firm, the CEO of the firm, owner of the firm, got into the deal. The deal went completely sideways, and a lot of money was lost, and so the relationship soured
between the vendor and
between me and the firm.
Mm-hmm.
And it happened in a way that was very personally hurtful for me. So, but it took that for me to seriously launch Touchpoint
in the way that it is.
And from the time those ties were cut, within a year. So to put this in perspective, ties were cut, and I formed the LLC that is now the entity of the business. And we went from one client paying enough to keep me in place to now we've got some of the biggest companies in the country are our clients, and we're just on a very different track.
So when we come back from the break, I would like to kind of talk about what that part of that journey was for you, the painful part of it, in terms of the severing of the connections. What seems like, because when you're in the middle of it, mm-hmm. It's very different perspective than hindsight, than after.
Oh yeah.
And so this is one of those experiences where let's talk about what you're facing while you're in the middle of it and when it immediately happened. Because for many of your listeners, if you're listening to this show, GoalPost, is really to let you know, and this is, I am talking to a very specific group of people. I am talking specifically to that person who you've lived life. We're not talking about the high school graduate or the person who's now early on in life, where you feel as though you're in this part of life where it's like something's missing. You can't put your hand on it. You can't put your finger on it. You have the job, you have the career, you have the education, you have the family, you have the 2 kids and the dog, right? It's not like you're struggling, but there's something missing because there is fear about making the step that the whispers are there. So we're going to talk about it when we return from the break, because this is a common theme. Damon, I'm having this conversation with you, but this conversation has happened with every single person that I know who's achieved any level of success.
Yeah.
You're not the first guest on this show, and you're not the first one to say, that was walking through fire. And I had to take a step of faith, and what the toll it took, because you could have given up and say, you know what, I'm going to ignore everything that's happened, and I'm just going to go find a job and call that a day, and then live the rest of your life where you've reached a point where you just question everything you've ever done and feel like there's no purpose, no meaning to it. So when we come back from the break, we're going to pick this right up. Do not go away. You're not going to want to miss this. Okay, so we are back from our break, and I'm sitting here. I'm having this conversation with Damon Williams, the president of Touchpoint Strategies here in Houston, Texas. And just before we let out, the topic came up of that pain, that what happens right before you get on that path that you're meant for, right? Where it is, in many instances, a painful lesson. Or, one of the things that Damon also mentioned was the fact that you may have a tool, you may be good at something, but that doesn't mean that that's the path you're supposed to be on. It just might mean that that tool is something you need on your way to the path that you should be on. And listening to the whispers before it becomes a whack in the head, knocking you off your feet, destroying everything you know to be as it is, so that you're actually on the right path. And so Damon was saying right before what actually created the full birth of Touchpoint Strategies, which is, if you're now joining us and you didn't get to hear this wonderful introduction, Touchpoint has created over $400 million in successful public and private partnerships, resulting in over $6 billion in new real estate development. And I wanted to hear this message, this story of the fact that he was stubborn. He was very stubborn.
Good way to put it.
And was not listening to where he was supposed to be, and had everything pulled out from under him. What did that feel like when you were in it? So let's not talk about the hindsight. Now you can look back, right?
Yeah.
Amazing story.
Mm-hmm.
But here you are doing this job you're good at for someone, but you weren't really believing in yourself at that point.
So the funny enough, so the predominant feeling at the time was betrayal, right? Like, I was just astonished. I couldn't believe that my intent, my character, all these things were being called into question because of something someone else had done, right? Not anything I'd done, but what someone else had done, and that someone happened to be a Black man. And so it was imputed unto me, right? Mm-hmm. To put it in biblical terms, right? Imputed unto me. Mm-hmm. So yeah, that was the hurtful part, was not understanding how someone could see me in that light, given all that I had done and given, right? And then it wasn't just one person. There were a number of people in that spectrum that feeling applied to. But the only person, interestingly enough, that it didn't apply to was me. I never acknowledged that I had betrayed me by staying in a place, allowing me to stay in a place that I knew I should not have been. Not allowing myself to grow out of what was comfortable for me, even though it was uncomfortable.
Isn't comfort is a word that is, that's the biggest dream killer if it's anything that I know.
Yeah, it's excellence never goes on sale. Period. So either accept the fact that, this discomfort and this challenge is the cost of entry to the level. It's not the cost of success. It's the cost of entry to the level where you start to build success.
Yes.
Right? There's no shortcut. There's no shortcut.
Yes, there isn't. Oh, and then I think this is where people get stuck. Because there is an unwillingness to go through that level of discomfort to accomplish whatever needs to be done and it's not necessarily about a financial gain, right?
Right.
It could be you're leveling up because you want a different type of partner. But guess what? You're attracting the type of partner you're attracting right now because you're at that level of that partner. You want a better quality person? Level up. It might mean doing things like taking care of your health, getting your stuff together. That might mean changing some of the habits you have to improve who you are, to attract the kind of person that you want.
Yeah.
So it's not necessarily about money.
No, if you want to do better, be better. That's
right.
Because not being better, let me be clear. Over the years, when I said I was, there were ups and downs and there were things that I did exceptionally well at some things. A couple of times that meant getting a bunch of money in. I could not tell you where any of those dollars are today. because of where I was.
Right.
Like my first big deal, never forget this. My first big deal was back when I was working in real estate finance in the mortgage industry. I went from making like $3,000 or $4,000 a month. This is in the early mid 90s. I was just getting my feet under me. So I was working for this mortgage company and just getting my feet wet, and literally looked up and picked up the phone for a call on a huge deal, and went from making let's say I made $4,000 this month. The next month I made $27,000.
Wow.
Because I picked up the phone. And I thought to myself, oh my God, why doesn't everybody do this?
No.
Like, this is easy. All I gotta do is be here and pick up the phone.
Right.
The next one will come.
No.
And so I went out and bought a car, and did a whole bunch of other things and spent most of that cash and did not close another deal for probably 3 or 4 months. And it was a small deal. And so I learned what people, sometimes early success is your worst enemy. Early success when you don't earn it is your worst enemy because you don't have anything to go on to replicate it. Right. Everybody was gone to lunch. I literally was the one who picked up the phone. Right. So, yeah, the hard learned lessons are the ones that have helped to shape me more than anything, because the pain is never from what you don't have, right? In my case, it's always been from misdirecting what I did have. Yes.
You think about, I think about that too. Like personally. And the pain that you go through, I am now starting to learn to thank the individuals involved in that destructive, what felt like a destructive period, because it actually turned it out to be a blessing, right? In hindsight, to say, you know what? Thank you. Because if you didn't do that, I would still be there today and not here today.
100%. Like literally, Bishop last week was the International Leadership Summit that Bishop Jakes does every year, and this exact thing came up, and he said, in the Bible you hear about Jesus in the garden getting ready to go to the cross, and he said, well, so why when the Romans come, the centurions come, and they're gonna take him away, and Peter pulls out a sword and lops off the guy's ear, and he's gonna fight everybody to defend Jesus. Jesus calls him Satan. Get thee behind me, Satan. But when Judas betrays him, he says, my friend, why do you come and kiss me? He said, because he understood that Peter, while well-intentioned in trying to help him, would have created a comfort that would have kept him from his destiny. Right. And Judas's betrayal was what actually set the wheels in motion for him to fulfill the purpose for which he came. And for us, it's often the same thing. It's those ugly situations, those hard situations that create that pain, that impetus that finally takes us into the next place where we can do what we have to do.
And maybe that's part of the lesson. We go through the pain, but the pain does not end. The lesson does not end until we realize what the purpose of it was for. Because otherwise you hold on to it and it becomes a poison, and the pain can kill you. Right. Because you're not learning the lesson from what the pain was for. But once you've learned it and understood, right, that the opportunity that comes from this, right? And this is, oh my gosh, like I literally, if you're listening, follow me on LinkedIn. Every so often I get like a blast of, call it wisdom or whatever, and I'll put it out. I'll put a post on LinkedIn. And this particular one was really well received because I had to sit down and look at everything that I was looking at as painful, because it wasn't until I saw the opportunities that everything was being provided that I had a profound change in who I was and what I was able to do, because I stopped, I could find that post and then read it, because it was just something that came to me. Because we like to say that thank yous should only be for the good things.
that can keep you in relatively few thank yous as you're building a new thing, right? The thank yous,
when we think that the thank yous are only for the good things, we miss it out. We miss out. And I'm going to read this. And I had put this out. This was the post that I had posted. 6 years ago, I was a very angry, depressed woman because I was going through a contentious divorce. It felt unfair. It hurt. I felt shame. I was so lost in a bubble of pain and pity that I couldn't see the opportunity the universe was handing to me. I didn't appreciate that my true friends were being revealed because I was focused on who abandoned me. I didn't appreciate the fact that I was free to design the life I was meant for because I was too focused on what I lost. I didn't appreciate the role model I was becoming as a mother for my daughters because I was too focused on the part I played in their pain. I didn't appreciate that I was fully reconnecting with my authentic self because I was too focused on the demise of the identity I've had for years as it pertained to my relationship with another. In the past 5 years since my divorce was finalized, I traveled the world, made international friends, earned an Ivy League grad degree, started a company, moved halfway across the country, inspired millions on TikTok. I'm now an executive CEO advisor to the owners of law firms. And all of this happened after I turned 40. And it took me a while to really understand that when we're going through a painful experience, if we keep focusing on the pain, we're missing out on the opportunity that it's actually handing to us.
Yep. Yeah. It's easy to if you let it.
And so many people do.
Well, but it requires, I'll say this for me. Yes, there's personal growth. It's all personal growth, right? There's a certain amount of that you can get by going through these things, right? You don't touch the stove after you burn your hand a couple of times because you figure out it's hot, right?
Right.
Very simple. But beyond that, there's the actual ingesting of the lesson requires more, right?
It does.
So you have to have a support system of people who are going through and have gone through to give you perspective. And then for me in particular, therapy was an amazing part of this journey. Like, there's no way possible I could have gotten personally to where I am, but business notwithstanding, that's a part of it. But to have the personal self-awareness and the growing personal piece that I have without therapy, like each of us comes at this, no matter what the lessons are, right? We talk about how the lessons come at us, but we have to look at how we come at the lesson, right? What disposition are we bringing? And so you talk about in your post, how you saw yourself and what that was born from.
Right. In hindsight, right?
Right.
Because in the middle of it, I was fighting it. I was
right.
resisting
In
it.
hindsight, it's
right.
My relationship to another and this and,
right.
and guilt and shame and all this.
Mm-hmm.
Okay. God, those things, we as a people
mm-hmm.
are just gaining the language.
Yes.
To address these things. So let's think about that. Not take away our global time of existence, right? Just look at our time in this country and look at our time since, the civil rights laws were passed. It's 2022. We haven't had this language in circulation in our groups for 10 years. Like, we're literally just now scratching the surface of understanding mental health as it relates to our personal health, our community's health, our ability to gather and maintain wealth. So yeah, it's all interconnected.
Having access to being able to be exposed to that language, and I like how you phrased it, right? It is a language. It is a
mm-hmm.
way that frames a perspective of what you're going through, is something that I just feel that is so insular. So, and I say that because in order to get that perspective right now, because it's not like open, you have to actively seek out. You
True.
have to actively seek out those spaces where this language is spoken so that you could learn from it, because it may or may not just come to you. I don't know, right? I don't know how it
right.
works, right? How does that happen? Like, and this is, I think we're touching on something that is so complex. I could probably do a whole show just on this particular issue. But I also feel as though when we are not aware that there is a language that you can learn to help you get perspective, we're at a disadvantage. And that is a big problem. If you're not even aware of it, you can't seek it. You can't seek out what you don't know.
Right. Right. And what traditionally has been taboo.
Very much so. It is just not spoken about. Right? Go pray
mm-hmm.
about it. That's it. We don't talk about it. Hush, hush.
Right.
Right. And so, and this is a language that touches so many, it's mental health. It is finances, it is purpose, it is meaning, it's understanding why you do certain things and not do certain things if you want to reach a certain level, and understanding what for some people seems to be like, I could never do that. Like, if you want to be a high performer, you can't be somebody who's watching daytime TV all day long and getting up at 10 a.m. and in bed at having a poor diet, and you will not ever reach any kind of level of success, because that requires you to have discipline over your basic functions, how you eat, how you sleep, do you exercise, basic functions. If you can't control that, you're not going to get to the next level. But that's a language in and of itself.
It is, and it has a precursor, right? So I'll give you an example, or in my life, right? So discipline was never my problem. All right. I had, because of trauma as a child, mm-hmm. I had discipline off the charts. Mm-hmm. My discipline was such that I could will myself into almost anything, if it involved me having to do it, or even more, me not to have it.
Got it.
Like I could, on a dime, drop whatever, right? And then just laser in or whatever I was in, often to the exclusion of what was actually good for me.
Right.
Right. So when we talk about, we see these posts and things about, 10 success habits and all these things, and they're not wrong, right? Successful people don't spend a lot of time on daytime TV. They don't do this. They don't do that. They don't, and that's all true, right? But why? Right? What orients them to do that? You replicating those actions is not going to make you successful.
Correct.
It will give you better habits.
Correct.
And better habits can be helpful, mm-hmm. right? But these habits are the outgrowth of good mental health, right? Right? When you're not self-sabotaging, amazing things can happen for you.
Yes.
Right? So that was a big part of, for me personally, it was getting my why in place. Right? And because, like I told you before, I was really good when I was number 2, because I could make that person my why. Mm-hmm. Oh, I want to make sure Janelle is successful. So I'm going to do all these things. And Janelle, what time do we have to be there in the morning? Okay, 6:00, I'll be there 5:30, and blah, blah, blah. And it was easy for me to orient those things around you or whoever that person is, because I didn't see you like I saw me. Mm-hmm. I didn't hold you guilty for things that had happened 10 years ago. Mm-hmm. But I did me.
Yeah.
I didn't.
The stories you're telling about yourself, the self-judgments.
I didn't think of you as a bad person, right?
Right.
I thought of me as a bad person who could do good things.
Right.
And so it took a long time to understand, like, wow, you're really treating yourself harshly when you shouldn't,
But isn't that the key when you become aware mm-hmm. of the stories you're telling yourself? Because you have to be aware that you're doing it, because if you're not, you can't make any steps to change it.
Not only that, you normalize it.
Yes.
So I'll tell you this quick story. One of my first sessions in therapy, so like I said, I've done a lot of things, lived a lot of lives, right? And so what would happen is, when I would get to the point that I would identify something in me that I didn't like, or I would I would do something and it would inadvertently hurt somebody. I never intentionally set out to hurt people, right? But I would do something or say something that would hurt somebody. And the way I phrased it was I would kill that Damon, like that day on the spot, boom, kill that guy, start over fresh with a new guy. Okay. And so over time, there grew this stack of bodies of these previous Damons that I just deemed, horrible and thrown away.
And you didn't embrace.
And I thought that was healthy.
Right.
Like I had normalized it and even built this, like it's the story I was telling myself was, I'm not hanging on to that old habit or that old person or that old, I'm and so I get to therapy. I don't really know what to expect, but it's maybe my second session or whatever. And my then therapist asked me, I don't remember what the question was, something about like, how did you get, how would you say you got to where you are? Or how would you, what brings you here or something like that. Anyway, in the course of the answer, I said, I've killed more Damons than most people will ever meet. And I said it in sort of this prideful kind of way, like, oh no, I've dealt with my, with everything in my past that I didn't like. And she I'll never forget it. She looked at me really sort of sympathetically. And she said, did they all deserve to die? And I was like, wow. I guess not, and
right. You never really thought about it, right?
I'd never given grace to those versions of me, those pieces. So of course they had to die. So that's a long way to say, as we're moving forward, we're talking about success and we're building wealth and building businesses and all these other things. You can't build them on an uninformed you, and you can't build them on the stacks of bodies that you've left in your wake.
Yes.
And call it a foundation. Like you can't, that's not a thing.
You have to bring the whole person, the good, the bad, and the ugly. You have to embrace those parts, not saying that they're part of who you are today in terms of how you act and behave, but there's no more shame in hiding or feeling as though you ignore it. It's part of your story and part of your fabric.
Right. If you don't believe the person who you're building all this success around is worthy, you'll find a way to tear it down.
Yes.
Point blank. Right. It's going to happen.
Yes. And then it's, this is just one of those topics that can go into so many different directions, because when we talk about the parts of ourselves that we don't like or we do like, are we talking about the parts of ourselves that we don't like because somebody else told us we shouldn't? Are we talking about the part of ourselves that we, for our own, like, this is just not part of who I am? And how do you differentiate between the two? Because when we've internalized stories we've heard from others and accepted as our own truth when it really isn't, then who are we really?
Yeah.
And it's not hard. That is hard.
We're snapshotting other people. And we get this little view of them, and we internally create this story about them.
Right.
And who they are, and then compare ourselves to a lie that we made up.
Correct. And then when we're trying to level up, we don't understand why we can't make it. Exactly.
Yeah, I don't understand why it's not working.
Oh Lord, Damon, this is like a whole therapy session.
Because nothing you thought about, nothing you formulated in this path is actually built in truth.
Correct. Yes.
You see them and thought, well, they got there. It must have been easier for them. Yes. They got there. They must have had this. They must have had that. This must have happened. That must have happened.
And that's not necessarily the truth.
No,
because
and
it is
most
only
people,
your perspective of what you think the truth is, but not
and,
the actual truth.
and many people will lie to you because of where they are.
Yes.
In you said you were you had to reconcile, who you had been as this person.
Yes.
For them, the version of them that you're seeing may be their avatar.
True.
And they may be 100% invested in this image and portraying it that you're seeing. And so you ask them, what happened? Or how'd you get here? And they'll give you 1,000 fluff answers, but they won't admit to you that they struggled, or they won't tell you how many times they failed. I've failed more times than most people will ever try in their lives.
If you're listening to this show right now, you just heard what came out of Damon's mouth. Go listen to every episode. Go listen to every episode of this show, and you will hear that common theme. But here's what I wanted to take away. He didn't say that he is a failure. He's saying he failed.
Oh, I failed.
But because you're authentic and you're starting to live, you're learning how to do it even more and more, living in your authenticity, that no matter how your circumstances change around you, you could be a great success. Tomorrow you could lose everything. You're still going to be Damon Williams, and you will build back up again, and you're still going to be the person you are today, tomorrow.
Oh, yeah.
And that is the essence that makes someone not just create success, but hold on to it and be centered and find meaning and purpose every morning when you wake up. Mm-hmm. It's not about the accolades and saying, oh my goodness, I've got millions. It's not about that, because if that is all it is for anyone, they can't sleep at night because you're going to be worried about every dollar and if you're going to lose it, because your identity, who you are, is wrapped up in the other, and you're not grounded and centered within the soul, the being, the existence of who you are.
Yeah, it's inauthentic. You cannot authentically be successful as someone you're not authentically built as,
because it's a lie, right? Yes,
like you can pull it off. Now, let me be clear.
But for how long?
You can pull it off, right? But man, and so the recurrent theme around my house, my wife and I joke about it all the time. It's not joking, but it's just observing. It's a lot of energy. Like, it takes a lot of energy for some of these people's like personas and the like it. That's a lot of work. I don't have that kind of energy. I just don't. I don't have that kind of energy, right? To keep up a whole other front of a whole other. I don't have it.
In one of my earlier episodes, I had Mark Bush, and he is a professor at Georgetown University, heads up the School of Foreign Service. Mm-hmm. And his story is so fascinating because he's a character. I love him. He's one of my professors. He was a visiting professor at Cornell. Mm-hmm. And he was telling about his early career, where he started off as a professor at Harvard, but he was so young, he looked like a kid, right? He looked like a boy. He's like, nobody, and this was back when he's like, we didn't have cell phones and iPads and all this technology. So, I'd say I was a professor, no one would believe me because of how I looked. And, he was saying that he was trying to live up to this, pretend to have this persona, wear a suit, to kind of fit this image of what people believed a professor should look like. And he's like, I gave up. He's like, it was hard not being me. He's like, it was just too much energy. He's like, I was not good at it. I was not good at not being me.
Mm-hmm. It's a job.
Right. And so, but we are a lot, how do we get to that point of embracing our whole self, the ugly parts? Not just the good parts.
Got to do the work. And that's what I mean. Like the therapy. So the interesting, I'll say this as a quick footnote and then jump into it. In the Black community, there's been this weird false comparison or false war about, well, I don't need therapy, I go to church. Or if you go to, if you believe in this, you don't believe in it. Zero, negative, wrong. I'm church 100%. I'm therapy 100%. Okay.
It's like going to the doctor or pray over it. I mean, you could do
there
both.
it is. There it is, right?
One doesn't replace the other. All right.
So, right. Luke was a physician. So I'm just saying, I don't know how this whole thing came up, other than people who were afraid to go to therapy. Came up with, just like people who were afraid to be successful came up with you can't be rich and righteous.
That is so far from the truth.
I don't know how that came up, right? So that's the lies, just lies, right? But we can have whatever we want internally, right? If we do the work. What that manifests as externally, we have a small amount of control over, right? A lot of things have to come together outside of you for things outside of you to happen.
Right.
Right. And there's only so much influence that we can have.
Yes.
But if we're not putting in the work to understand our authentic self, right? To discover and empower and then maintain that person's peace, that person's space, that person's boundaries, and know what if you don't know anything else, know what your authentic self's no's are. Like, I'm crystal clear on what my no's are.
Yes.
Business, like we had to fire a client last year. I've never in 25 years I've been in business in one form or another, never fired a client until last year. And it was a university that we had to fire because they were wrecking everybody's peace. Like, we couldn't work. But that to say this, it's okay. Like, you're the professor you're talking about, right? He's portraying this persona. And I tell people, when I think about it, like, it's okay to fake it till you make it, right? It's okay to fake it till you make it.
Yes.
What's wrong is lying because you're not trying.
Right.
Right?
Lying because you're not trying. Yeah.
You're not trying.
Yeah.
Well, how come you got a fresh lie for it? Well, this and that. You tell people things that are patently not true.
And that catches up to you.
Yeah, because you want to project this thing that you're not really honestly doing the work to become.
Right.
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 So that's when I talk about, like, doing the work, like, that's a part of it.
It is.
You gotta bring you to the table.
Personal development. This is, I was talking to one of my members who's, like, going through this change of experiencing significant growth in her business in a way that she's not used to. It's not in her family, it's not in her friends, another circle. And, I'm like, this is where the personal development becomes even more important.
Absolutely.
Because in order to grow in any area of your life, right, you have got to level up. You have got to find the people who are already where you are. You have got to find the people who know how to get you where you'd like to go. And that may not be who's in your circle right now. I'm not saying, I'm like, I said, look, I want to make sure that you don't misquote what I'm trying to say. Don't ignore the people that's in your life. But now your relationship with them will change, because when you went to kindergarten, you needed that kindergarten teacher. You respected that kindergarten teacher. That teacher provided a role that was very important for that specific level of growth in your life. You didn't keep the same kindergarten teacher when you went to college. And then when you go to grad school, it's a different set, right? Because you need to keep leveling up where you are. So this means
you said that to me when we talked about, we were talking about accountants and tax advisors.
Right, exactly. So when you're at one level, you start off with, you might do it yourself, first of all, for free. Then as you level up, you might go to H&R Block or whoever else you use. Then as you level up, you get a CPA. You reach a certain level of strength. You have to leave that and go to a tax strategist. It's a very different way, because you're leveling up as you grow. And it's not to say that, oh my gosh, because you've left the CPA you've used for 15 years, that you stop having any kind of relationship with that person. No, the relationship's just going to change because that person is no longer equipped to get you to the next level to where you're going. Right. And that is what, sometimes that makes people uncomfortable. They want to hold on to relationships in the same way. Right. And I'm not, I have to be very careful with how, I'm articulating this part of it. But who we surround ourselves with can keep you where you are, pull you down from where you are, or lift you up from where you are.
Right.
And you have to be very deliberate about that.
And we limit our ability. You said pull you down.
Keep you where you are, or lift you
pull
up.
you up. Okay. And we limit our ability to do all but two of those things if we don't level up.
Exactly.
I
We cannot lift up.
I can't pull you where I'm not. Right?
Exactly.
So
exactly.
in that CPA reference, me going on to be whatever I go on to be, and that person being able to say, oh yeah, I have new client, bigger client, or potential bigger client. Hey, yeah, I helped Touchpoint grow to where it got.
Right.
You should definitely come to me. Rather than, oh, hi, new startup. I've been doing new startups for 20 years. Like, that's not, how is that a thing?
It's right. And this is an uncomfortable conversation, though, for many.
It's not comfortable.
Because if you're already there, it's not uncomfortable. Like, you've already leveled up. You get it.
Well, it's not comfortable because it's already in your rear view.
That's right.
Yeah, you already had it.
That's exactly right.
Right.
That's exactly right.
Right. But it should be, I'll say it this way, it should be a difficult conversation for everybody, right? Because if you have any loyalty with the people that you deal with, changing those relationships is always going to be difficult.
Right.
Right. It just is what it is. And especially when those people have become more than vendors to you, you've become. But
then when you're changing those relationships, you don't sever them. You can then you're now in a position to lift up. So right. You might be leaving your CPA to go to somebody who's a tax strategist, right? But that doesn't mean that you wouldn't stop referring your friends to the CPA.
Absolutely.
Right. So you can lift them up because now you're in a position to say, I could send, like, whatever the relationship is, meaning whatever the person, it's not just a CPA, it could be anything. Mm-hmm. But when you think about who are you getting advice from when it comes up to relationships, about your mental health, right? Like, you want to speak with people or be around people. And I tell this to everyone, sometimes it is not possible to be in the presence of the people who could actually help you. Mm-hmm. Find the next best thing. Books are really good. They are your friend.
Podcasts.
YouTube, like this one. Come here and listen and hear people talk.
there is no, and so earlier we were talking about the being exposed to the language.
Yes, that is exactly what it is.
There's
being exposed to the language.
There's zero barrier to exposure to the language. Now, might you have a barrier to getting one-on-one counseling?
Probably.
Depending on your economic situation and what.
Yes.
Yes, absolutely. As you noted in my bio, right? I'm a service disabled veteran. So I was able to get counseling through the VA system, right? My therapy came through VA, right? I don't take that for granted. I don't, I'll go out and do it. No, I get it. Like, especially when I started, if I had to pay for all that out of pocket, it probably would have, it would have been a whole different set of considerations.
Right.
Right. About how I went about that. I think I still would have done it. I definitely wouldn't have done it as intensely as I was able to do it, especially the first year.
But you would have found a way to get something.
I would have gotten some because of how I realized it was time for me to get my story about myself, how I saw myself, and to understand how I had processed, things in my past.
Yeah.
I was like, okay, it's got to happen now. Like, I get it. Right. Yeah. So, but to the point being, there's no, just like, everybody and their mama is getting Forex, instant message, direct messages, and IG and Facebook, and everybody. Right. The same way that people find you can find who you want to hear from.
Always, but you know what it stems from, Damon, and people don't understand this. You have to decide that you want to do it.
That's the thing.
You don't have to have the money. You don't have to have, you just have to make the decision that this is what you want, that you want to level up. Because when, I think it's in Lao Tzu, which is Tao Te, the book is called Tao Te Ching by Lao Tzu. And when it says, when the student is ready, the teacher will appear.
Absolutely.
And when you make that decision, you would be amazed how you can find the resources based on where you are, based on your economic, how you will get the right resources, the right connections, the right to get you, but you have to have that desire and that want to say, I want to change where I am. I want to change the way I think. I want to change the way I feel. I want to be able to do more. I want to feel more. I want more meaning. I want more purpose. But you have got to make the decision that you want it.
And let me be clear. I don't know anyone personally who is successful who has not gone to therapy. I don't know anybody personally, like my friends who are entrepreneurs, the people we hang, like it's guys I'm doing deals with that just like we casually it comes across like everybody's like, yeah. We watch Billions. I don't know if you're a fan of, Billions on Showtime.
You are like the second person who's been talking about this show. I have got to get my act together and at least start watching it.
I love Billions. I love Billions.
Wait. Just so you know, the people who are talking about the show Billions are all very successful, wealthy people.
Yes, because it's based on the real principles, right? But one of the things that you find, as the show implies, it's these billionaire hedge fund guys, right? And private office, big private office guys on Wall Street. In-house in their firm, they have a performance coach. The performance coach is a psychologist. That's what she is. So all these things that she's helping, they're going to war against, these big things and trying to figure out why they missed a trade or why they didn't see this and why they didn't see that. And she's not an economist walking them through the market dynamics and what were you thinking?
Yes.
Why were you afraid?
Yes. Let's get into that. Let's talk about that.
Right. So,
yes.
What would a win have looked like for you? Talk to
yes.
Tell me that. No, say the words. Right.
Yes.
And that's that's how you confront these things, right? And so if we can fantasize about being, Zuckerbergs and Robert Smiths and all these people who have been tremendously successful, then let's emulate the process for real. Let's not be lying because we're not trying. That's right.
It's I feel who is it? Elon Musk. He has his kids not in traditional school because he doesn't believe it actually teaches you to learn. And there's something to be said about that because many people who have gone through schooling and have associated the process of learning with this rigid structure that's designed by somebody else for a specific purpose that's not really in their control.
Right.
And so it is, there's a reason why, with all the studies that's been done for anyone who's achieved anything, everyone who has gotten anywhere significant in life without fail 100% all read. Whether it's an audiobook, right? Whether you're listening to it, you're ingesting information for the purpose of growing and learning and expanding your horizon, and you're investing in yourself. So that's therapy, that's coaching, that's personal advising, that's growth, because what happens in your mind is going to determine everything that you experience in your environment. You can't escape it.
And the concept of majors is very interesting outside of a few exceptions, right? Like, because people say, oh, I want to be a lawyer. I'm going to be pre-law. That's not really, okay, what does that mean?
What does that mean?
What does that mean?
Can't explain that.
Or I want to be a doctor, so I'm going pre-med. Okay, so you're taking some science courses, some biology, some chemistry, but what does that mean? Right? Like you could, I know.
I'll tell you what that means. You're doing what they believe is supposed to be something good because that's what they've been raised to believe. And then they end up 40 years old in a career that they absolutely they're just not getting out of it, other than maybe good pay.
Perhaps.
There's an emptiness.
Right. But I'm not against, I want to be very clear. I'm not against formal education.
We are not talking about being against formal education. It's being for what do you truly want to do? And what does that mean? And what does that look like? It's not always. Right. I
had a very spotted, to say the least, academic career. All right. So I went to, and as a kid, I was in magnet schools, which here in Texas, magnet is accelerated. Now what they would call AP. Okay. Magnet was a whole, they didn't really have AP courses kids. In the same, gifted and talented, I guess would be the equivalent, right? Mm-hmm. So I was in that program because, objectively speaking, I had some academic gifts. Mm-hmm. But I dropped out of high school because I just didn't get it. Like it wasn't making sense to me about like why I needed to, how this was going to help me. Some of it mental, trauma responses, some of it other stuff. So I joined the Navy at 17. I start college. I get my GED when I was like maybe 19, and I started taking college classes. I worked in medicine in the military. I was and I did very well there, right? Mm-hmm. So I was pre-med. So in college, I had a 3.9 GPA in all my classes except one, algebra.
We share something in common.
I was teaching. So literally I was working in the Methodist hospital here. I was teaching medical students, medical interns. I was teaching them clinical medicine, how to actually treat patients. They were tutoring me in chemistry and algebra because I couldn't pass. I couldn't pass chemistry because I couldn't pass algebra. Right. Wow. And it was just, and so it became this real shameful thing for me. Like I couldn't, like, how is this possible? I could explain theoretical mathematics to you. I could not do algebra. Algebra, yeah. And here's what happened. So finally, one summer, I said I got to pass this class, right? Because now it's holding me up. So I went to the community college here, Houston Community College, for this one class. So I enrolled in algebra, and I'm sitting in the class. It's like our second or third class, and the professor was a Black lady. Doctorate, nationally known as a mathematician. At the community college, okay. Yeah, as nationally known as a mathematician. She was older, and this was her, like retirement gig. Okay. She's professor at the community college. And after class was over, I went to her and I was like, I'm not getting this. And she said, sit down. And she gave me a piece of paper, and she gave me an equation, and she said, work this out for me. And I sat there and I'm going, and I'm not getting anywhere. And she said, stop. I know what your problem is. I'm like, what is it? Because I'm blowing the curve in every other class. I can't pass algebra. Yeah. She said, you don't know what an equation is. And I said, what do you mean? She says, you keep trying to figure out how to make these two statements, A plus B is equal to C plus D, work. She said, the equation is a question. Is A plus B equal to C plus D? And the answer is yes or no. I was so hung up on being afraid to be wrong in this answer that I was working out that I had missed the question.
Powerful is that? That is a whole life lesson there. That's not just an algebra.
The question was very simple, right?
You are so afraid to be wrong,
right?
Or let's put it in life, or fail, that you miss the whole point, the whole question.
Yeah, I'm doing all this mathematics feverishly, and when they don't balance, I'm infuriated.
And you're and then
I got to make it balance. I got to make it balance. I got to make it balance. The question is, does it balance or not? And you could have got a really quick no if you'd have known the question. No, and on to the next one.
You know, we have, look, so for everyone listening, notice how long this show is a little bit longer than normal, because this is exactly what happened when I first met Damon. The conversation just would not, and I'm gonna have to call you back. You're gonna have to come back again. You have to have you as a repeat guest. We're gonna have this again. But to have these life lessons that happen, and just so you know, I struggled. I failed math. I could not figure it out in high school. I passed math only one time, and that's the only time it counted, because in Trinidad, unlike the US system, the only the exam you took at the end of high school counted. That was the only time I ever passed it. The fact that I went back for an MBA was because I had a life experience, and all sorts of mindset things had happened and changed, because I really kind of grew up with, I was never just going to be good at math. But to hear you articulate that lesson that you learned from this professor, where it is so powerful. And if you're listening to this, you're stuck somewhere, you don't want to miss out on what your full capability is, because you are trying to make sure that everything's right and everything's perfect, and you're afraid to be wrong when you're not asking the question.
Yeah, the question is this right for you?
Is this?
Yeah, why? Yeah, I can't make it work, and I'm trying to, and this is that.
Don't try to make it work. Is
it right for you? Right? Is this true? Is this you? Is this authentic? No. Okay. On to the next thing.
Damon, after this entire conversation, which I would love for it to continue, because this is amazing. For anyone who's listening, right? And we're speaking to that person who their, kids are grown, they're probably about our age, but feeling kind of stuck. What advice would you give that person? Or at least a word of wisdom, something that benefited you, that you think that, is something that, to give it some consideration, incorporate into their life, think about it, because it might just change your perspective on how they're approaching.
I'll say this, entrepreneurship is a thing. It's not the thing, right? It's not everything. It's a thing. It's a path, right? Going corporate is a path. Going nonprofit is a path. Your path is your path, right? For those of us over 40, there's a definite value for how much you should invest in the things that you don't have. And that's zero. Zero, right? The skills that you have, the life that you've lived, the what's brought you to here contains the tools that you need to enter into what comes next. Now, what comes next will likely have its own set of things that come with it, but there's nothing that you need to find outside of you to do what's next for you. That's when you're 20. That's when you're, as you said, you're fresh out of college and you're experiencing the world, and you got all these lessons, life lessons to learn. If you don't know anything else, by this time, you should know you should have an idea of who you authentically are and what value that person authentically holds. And if for whatever reason you don't know that, don't feel any kind of way about it. Find a therapist,
do the work.
Right.
Right.
Get what you need to do, buy the books, do whatever you need to do, and start doing that work, because that's the jewel that's buried that will be the key to the next door. Chasing something outside of you at this stage is not going to get it.
No, it's not. Damon, thank you so much for joining me tonight. I'm going to have you back on the show, because these are the types of conversations that are meaningful, that for someone who's listening, to hear that perspective, to hear that part of the journey. How can people reach you if they wanted to reach you, Damon?
You can always go on our website. Touchpointtx.com is our website. And my email address is damon@touchpointtx.com.
Okay. If you're watching the video, if you're listening to this, you can go to YouTube, and the video of the show will have the text right below the bar. So many ways to hear it on the radio at allrealradio.com, or listen to it on YouTube, or listen to it to wherever you listen to your podcast, the audio version of it. But take what Damon is saying to heart. He has lived it. He's still living it. And you can check him out. Go to janellesam.com. His bio is there. You can learn more about who he is and what he's done. And you can check out his website and check out his company, Touchpoint Strategies, LLC.
Absolutely. Thank you for having me, Janelle. This was an amazing opportunity and a great conversation. GoalPost is making a difference.
Thank you. Thank you for listening to GoalPost. Tonight's show we had Damon Williams from Touchpoint Strategies. You just heard his amazing story of the work he's done and had to put into himself. And that amazing lesson with his teacher, his algebra teacher, that sometimes we try so hard to be right, we miss the question. If you enjoyed the show today, if you'd like to listen to it again, you can find us on YouTube. You can visit my website at janellesam.com. And also, there's a new show every single Sunday night on allrealradio.com, 7 p.m. Central, 8 Eastern. Join in for the live airing, the first airing of the show. And then you can listen to it wherever you find your podcast the Monday after. So thank you so much for joining me tonight. I hope you enjoyed the show, and see you next time on GoalPost.